The Career Competitor Podcast is brought to you, as always, by Tall Slim Tees, and I cannot encourage you all enough to head over to tallslimtees.com right now, simply because they offer just about anything and everything you could really need around this time of year, from your basic crew necks and V-necks to your long sleeve options, and also even hoodies and some pullovers. Just about everything, like I said. And if you need an added incentive to get over to the website right away and check out their wide array of options, then here is one for you. The code CAREER10, that is the word career and the number 10, that if you were to use that at checkout, you will receive a 10% discount on whatever you decide to order. So don't wait any longer. Go check out tallslimtees.com today and find yourself a shirt that fits the way it is supposed to. Let's get to the show.
This is the river of life called purpose. I will be better. I will help others be better. That's who we are as people. And when people realize this, that this is our mission, this is what gives our lives meaning.
Hello and welcome into the latest installment of Career Competitor, a podcast that is a part of the CG Sports Network. I'm Steve Meller, and we are the show that seeks to light the competitive fire within you in order to succeed within your career. What a fantastic extended edition of the show we have for you today. But before I introduce our very special guest, let me remind you all to check out careercompetitor.com, where you can find our episodes, information, and history on the show, as well as connect with me through all our social media handles. Furthermore, if you think you or someone you know could be an ideal candidate for the show, you can contact me directly through the website or at careercompetitorpodcast@gmail.com. Now, our guest today is a pioneer of the sport of surfing in its competitive format, who went on to build global clothing brands within the sport, and today is motivating people the world over on how to better themselves with a reset that can shape your mindset for a better future. Shaun Tomson recently spoke with me to discuss a wide array of topics from his past, and also presented some ideals that I know will truly impact all of you listening. At the core of Shaun's work today is the belief that we can all establish purpose for ourselves, as he believes that the greatest work we do for both ourselves and others comes from the ability for one to have purpose in their day. I encourage you all to pay attention to the way Shaun's surfing life has shaped his world today, in that the two almost exist hand in hand without, however, necessarily defining who he is, which is a vital lesson for all current and former athletes out there listening. Be sure to stick around at the end of the show to listen to my Career Competitor Keys to Success. But for now, let's dive right into my interview with entrepreneur and surfing legend Shaun Tomson, and I hope you all enjoy. Okay, well, I am truly honored to have this opportunity to speak with Shaun Tomson this evening. Shaun, first and foremost, welcome to the show, and how are you?
Great to be on the show. I'm coming to you from Santa Barbara in California.
Beautiful part of the world. Beautiful part of the world. I've been fortunate enough to see that myself once or twice over my years of travel. So yes, certainly envy the type of views I'm sure you get to wake up and go to bed to most days. But a lot of that has to do with your background in the sport of surfing, I assume. And with that being said, Shaun, I'd love for you just to kind of introduce yourself here and let everybody know who you are, what it is you're doing today, and just go ahead.
Well, I've lived here in Santa Barbara in California for about 25 years. I'm originally from a place called Durban in South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in Durban, went to school there, went to university there, even did some time in the army doing my compulsory national service. Then I was on the pro tour for many years. I was one of the original group of professional surfers who helped develop professional surfing, along with a group of Aussies and Hawaiian guys. So we created a whole pro surfing tour, which was wonderful. We helped build the surfing industry. I started my first surfing brand when I was about 23 years old, called Instinct, and then spent about 16 years on the tour, traveling around the world, surfing amazing waves, going to great countries, help build this new sport from a lifestyle into a sport. And after my career was over, I got back into the apparel business. I sold my first company, and my wife and I opened another company. Started writing books, made a pretty cool movie that some people might have seen. And if you for anyone that's interested in sport and how people can find their find that passion, and how they can really make a change in culture and a change in their lives by really getting connected to their passion, and what you have to do in order to be successful. You've got to bust down the door. Uh, so I was involved in sort of a number of different waves in my career. Obviously, the first one was surfing. The second one was more business orientated around apparel. And then my wife and I sold our company in 2005 to a large publicly traded company. And then we had a terrible tragedy. We lost our beautiful son, who was 15 and a half at the time, Matthew. Played a dangerous game at school. So that really took my life in a completely different direction. Um, I started to write books, and I started to speak um, about self-empowerment and how to find your purpose and how to find your passion and how to find your path and how to find your power, at large groups, small groups, all sorts of groups, from the biggest companies in the world to the poorest schools to the biggest universities. To now I just speak. It's wonderful. I speak to these amazing groups of people, PTSD survivors, rehab clinics, massive corporations like Gilead Sciences, um, and I really get a wonderful insight, I think, into humanity and what drives us, what our fundamental missions are in life, and I get people to. It's called writing your code. So millions of people have done it, and it's really interesting to see. And it's a super simple process. I say when I talk, I give two things. One is I just give a perspective. I don't give a prescription. It's just a perspective of my life that I've lived, and then I show them this code that came from surfing, and I get everyone together to write 12 lines. Every line beginning with "I will." It's just a simple 20-minute exercise in visualization, in commitment, in envisioning, and it's a simple way to find your purpose. And for many people, purpose is very complicated. Like, what's your fundamental purpose? And this little exercise really helps people understand their purpose, and it also helps people understand everyone else's purpose. So it helps people understand the meaning of life, and ultimately, it's a great way to connect people, because people realize that we are bound by these shared values, we're bound by the same commitments, and that we're way more similar than we are different. You have these crazy leaders who are out there touting their own vision of the future, and there's like a chasm between us, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, or right across the world. There are these big chasms that are created by these so-called leaders who we vote for, and most of them I think, are pretty clueless in terms of how to bring people together. And I've found that this little code, it's super powerful and very efficient, very elegant. And I like to say that the code, it's open source code. Anyone can use it. There's no royalty, there's no fee, it's free. So, I encourage people all over the world just to use it. 12 lines, every line beginning with "I will." Write it down. Find your purpose, find your power, find your path. It's simple. It's so simple that it's almost like a fairy tale.
I mean, I love it, and Shaun, when I almost when I read an article that you wrote recently, going over this, before this interview. This, and we'll get to this a little later on. Otherwise, we won't talk about anything else because I am so. I did connect with it on so many levels that for me personally, I was just so, even though I was obviously already excited to have the chance to speak with you, this particular article really just hit me on a number of levels in terms of just the work I've been doing on myself now for a few years. But like I said, I don't want to get into it straight away simply because this will just be the entire interview because I would love just to learn going back to those 16 years on the tour and the surfer that you were for so many years. And surfing is a sport where you really do embody the identity of being a surfer. I think a lot of sports, when you're on the playing field, so to speak, you can be that version of yourself and then you can go away and maybe be a different version. But surfing is everything, right? In terms of your life, in terms of who you are as a being, the identity that you had, I assume, during those years as a surfer. Could you really connect with any other identity aside from I'm a surfer and that's that?
But it is all encompassing. It's absolutely, totally absorbing. Um, and even now, my pro surfing days are long behind me, but I'm still like the surfer guy. If I go and speak at a big conference and I'm speaking with sort of well-known speakers or well-known people, it's like that's the surfer guy. So surfing is, and I'm proud of it, and I love it, and I'll be the surfer guy all day long because surfing has given me everything. It's given me, a career, a wonderful life. It's given me this amazing connectivity to nature. It's given me an understanding of myself. It's given me an understanding of the world. It's given me an understanding of other people. It's Surfing has just been amazing to me. But it is absolutely all encompassing. But it's like surfing. You live that surfing life. We'll wake up, before dawn, and we'll drive 50 miles and to crack the right tide at the particular right spot. And the surf might be 15 feet or the surf might be 10 feet. And, maybe there's a chance when you paddle out there, you're going to get the best wave of your life or the worst wave of your life. Maybe you're going to have an encounter with 50 dolphins. Maybe you're going to have an encounter with a great white shark. There's this element of uncertainty, which I think makes it incredibly alluring, and it makes it obsessive as well. Um, I think the obsessive nature of surfers, um, I think, is rare in sport, or it's rare in art or lifestyle. The surfing, it's not like, well, it's a sport. There's a lifestyle element, there's an artistic element to it as well. So it does have this sort of multi-dimensional aspect to it. And I think that's why people build their lives around it. I mean, I've got a lot of friends of mine in their 50s and 60s, and they're still as enthused now as they were when they were teenagers. They still dream about going on that trip to the Mentor Islands or going on that trip to Jeffreys Bay. Or it does, become part of your core being, and it does become part of your, yes, it becomes part of your identity, but but deeper than that, it becomes part of your soul.
Mm. I love that. I love that because it's funny. I come from the sport of swimming, and so for me, the joke always was growing up that you could pick a swimmer out of a lineup just by seeing them in their clothes because swimmers have a specific body type that comes with the territory. And for surfers, I don't think it's too
Mm-hmm.
disconnected. I think there's some
Surfers as well, yeah.
yes, there's it's very
It
there's
is. They have that kind of that sort of wedge
uh-huh,
look.
absolutely.
But there's it's interesting. There's something about people who live in that fluid state. Swimmers have that, as do surfers. They have that sort of rhythm and that connectivity and that flow through water. When you see a great swimmer swim any of the stroke of this sort of amazing way in which they sort of languidly flow through water. And the best surfers, too, have this wonderful style where, yes, they're connected to the water by this little sliver of fiberglass that might be, 2.5 inches thick. Um, but still, they still have this sort of a connectivity and movement through water like swimmers do. There's a wonderful connectivity there between them.
Yeah, and the one thing sticking with this theme of this fluidity, as you put it, I love that term because for me, in the sport of swimming, for example, you always say the most natural and most competitive and most successful swimmers, they make it look easy. That's always the term that
Mm-hmm.
gets used. And with a sport like surfing, that ability to become one with the water very much mirrors that same
Very much
ideal.
so. Uh-huh.
The one thing I would love to learn more though is how did you find that ability to flip some sort of competitive switch within that sort of calm, easygoing vibe that comes with the surfing community? There's obviously this hugely competitive element to the sport as well. How did you find the ability to go from maybe a state of that comfortable environment, that natural environment, and then suddenly be able to say, okay, this is a competition now. Now this is where I have to find that competitive edge in what I'm doing.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that the competitive aspect of surfing is not an integral part of what surfing is. You play a game of tennis, even recreationally, it's all about competition. You play a game of rugby, football, baseball, whatever it is. Tennis is sort of an integral part of that particular game. But surfing is way more about free expression and pushing your own limits, connecting to nature. So when they added on the competitive aspect to surfing in the 60s, um, and I surfed in my first competition in 1967. I mean, I learned the system, and all it was is, you had to learn the system, and that's what I did. I learned the system. Also, I was very, very focused and competitive, very, very driven, um, and also I think I had a good ability, and I think all great sportsmen have to have this ability uh, to be able to still your mind. I think it's really important to be still internally, because there was a lot of surfers who, in free surfing sessions, were just like mind-bogglingly good. I'd watch them and go, "This guy's going to blow my doors," but then they couldn't handle the stress and pressure of competition. They weren't able to still their mind, and I think it's a very much of an overlooked technique. This technique of stilling and emptying, um, emptying your mind, so that the matter and what you have to do is very simple, and it almost happens without thinking, which is the very best moments, the very, very best moments in surfing. And perhaps, uh, surfers might argue it's the very best moment in sport is when you ride inside the tube. So you ride inside the spinning tunnel of water, um, right on the cusp when the surf is very, very dangerous between life and death. And you're in this state, what the famous Hungarian psychologist Miha Csikszentmihalyi calls a state of flow, absolute focus, in absolute command of your mind, body, and soul. And I used to feel that when I was in that state and inside the tube, and that's sort of my contribution to surfing, was that I created a revolutionary new technique for riding inside the tube, actually riding inside the tube instead of just going in a straight line inside the tube. I was able to still my mind, and you feel like you can slow down time, and that time is expanded. And then in the very, very best tubes, you feel that you can curve that wall to your will. But the very best tubes happen when you're operating on instinct. And that's what I called my first
Mm.
brand, my first clothing label,
Right.
which grew into a nice size brand around the world, and we sold in 13 countries. I called it Instinct because the best moments in surfing are inside the tube, and the best tubes happen when you're operating on instinct. And it's very reflective of all competition. That those moments when sportsmen are operating on that outer edge of their ability,
Mm.
pushing it to the max. They're operating with a clear, still mind that is almost in a way thoughtless, and they're operating on instinct. And that's the sensation that they call flow today. That psychologists call flow. Uh, but it was nice. I called my company Instinct back in the 70s.
Mm.
It's nice to see that state is now reflected in psychological studies about sport and optimal performance.
Yeah, and I think this is always the cool component to a lot of the philosophies that are always exercised and demonstrated and valued in a modern day era is that if you go back decades, you can see where the evidence of these happenings began. You learn from people like yourself in the late 60s, early 70s that were creating ways to do things that few, if any, had been able to do before. And in order for you to get to these historic heights, you had to find a level of mentality or a level of being, let's say, that was something that people weren't willing to maybe discover. They weren't willing to put themselves in a position to discover such a mindset. And here you are years and years later down the line, and these terms like flow state and working on instinct, these are so commonly
Yeah,
used now in the sporting world, but this is something that decades ago here you were showing that this is the first signs of human beings actually willing to put themselves physically in a position where they require this specific mental state. And I just find that just incredible, simply because I'm talking to someone who is a part of history. That's the big elephant in the room, so to speak. But secondly, for me, I just love the way in which you connect that to your ability to compete. That it wasn't about raising what you were doing; it was actually stilling what you were doing. And I think that is something that so many competitors in any walk of life can really learn from, because I think everybody puts that pressure on themselves to move upwards in some way in order to perform, when really you just need to find a more level calmness to what you're doing to exercise this instinct that you talk about. And that's, to me, is just a wonderful sentiment. And when did you start to maybe notice that this was something that was maybe separating you, or did you notice it more in other competitors as the years went by?
yeah. No, I always knew that was a terrific asset, but I think what's important is that one might think that it's kind of a sleepy vibe, but it's not sleepy at
Right.
all. You're waiting and your heat's coming up, and the surf's 10 to 12 feet at the Banzai pipeline, and the heat before you, a guy's gone into the reef head first and brain damage, and they've taken off in the ambulance. And yes, there is that level of stress and anxiety before a heat. But I found that yes, that I had a super simple routine. I found that a routine prior to your heat was very, very stilling. I used to, and I tell sometimes young guy will ask me for help, and I'll say, it's really simple. You've got to your routine. You've got to have your bag with all your stuff in it. You go down the beach, you have a bag, put all your stuff in the bag. Whatever type of athlete you are, you have everything in one place,
Mm.
and you're organized. So there's no like running around before a heat, like where's my wetsuit, where's my fin. I mean, the amount of times I've been down at surfing competitions and I've had some of the best surfers in the world run up to me before a heat. Hey, can I borrow a fin? Have you got a spare fin? I lost my fin. I'm going like, be a professional, man. Just put
Right.
stuff in a bag. You don't have to, and it creates sort of that stilling motion. Then I would sit by myself, before a heat, not be around people, not be around anyone else's energy but myself, and just quietly watch the ocean. And then, 20 minutes before, with plenty of time, I'd go and get my singlet, and I'd always be the first guy to paddle out in the lineup. And I had that same routine whether I was competing at Burley Heads in Australia or the Banzai Pipeline in Hawaii or Jeffreys Bay in South Africa. So it was it was a very simple routine that helped me still my mind. And I very seldom, I think throughout my career, lost the heat by making a mistake from pressure. Um, I felt my system was a great system. And I would see a lot of guys crack up. But I mean, yes, in the heat, you might make a mistake. You might take off on the wrong way, but seldom would I fold. I can't remember, ever folding and, gagging on a maneuver because I was overly stressed. I had a good system, and it worked well for me. And I really felt that I was able to maximize my talent. So, with me, there was always the duality, and there was a conflict between this, in some ways, the spiritual element of surfing and the competitive element. There always had to be that balance. And I never thought of going surfing as going practicing. For me, the best parts of my surfing were outside of competition. Yes, I love competition too, but I really, I think I just loved it. Loved the connectivity to the ocean. Loved that, pushing my own limits. And I think that all the way through until a few years ago, man, I was still going at the absolute outer edge of my ability on every session, and I loved it. I loved that feeling of pushing oneself. I'm a little bit more relaxed now in the surf, but I loved that. I could push myself, and it gave my life a lot of challenge and meaning.
And we certainly share that in terms of just maybe a time in our life where we thoroughly enjoyed the challenges that came with, as some people would call, training. But I'm right there with you. In my years as a swimmer, I rarely did I sort of get to a point where I was daunted by what was coming in a practice or a training session or even a competition for that matter. Like it was always opportunistic. It was always a opportunity to get better, to make that connection, as you put it, with either the process of getting better or just simply the skills at hand. So certainly a lot of similarities in that regard in terms of our mindsets. But I want to stay with that theme of
I'll tell you what, I want to just say one thing.
Yeah.
So, okay, during my pro career, I won 19 events. I won the world title. I only won it once. I came very close in 1985. And, I would read sports biographies and autobiographies. I used to love to read what other sportsmen thought about sport, and I'd read the articles that were written about them. And of course, Mark Spitz, the second greatest swimmer of all time.
Right.
And I met Mark. We were actually inducted into the Jewish Sports Hall of Fame, and in Israel together, which was a great moment. Yeah. But I remember reading. They asked him about his philosophy of winning, and his statement was, "First is first, and second is nothing." And it very much aligns with this philosophy of, this amazing football coach here, a guy called Vince Lombardi, a legend in the United States. And, his big statement that's attributed to him is, winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. And yes, while I was a sportsman, I could never subscribe to that philosophy. Yes, I love to win, and I thought you had to put everything in it, but winning isn't everything. I disagree. And I don't think first is first and second is nothing, because there's a tiny, tiny fraction of the population that will win. But still, when you put it on the line and you push yourself to the max, even though you don't win, it can still be unbelievably satisfying. And the one's evaluation of oneself is not always defined just by the number. I mean, one of my greatest victories was sixth place out of six at the Smirnoff Pro in Hawaii in 1975. I proved to myself that even after like a horrifying wipeout, I could pedal back out. And for me, I think it's important in today's world that it's not like I believe that every single person gets a trophy just for showing up. People say, "Oh, we mollycoddling young people, and everyone gets a trophy." That's not what I subscribe to. But I subscribe to from a personal perspective. When you put it on the line and you go for it and you give it, and maybe you won't win, but there's great pride and there's great power in giving it. You give it, and that's the reward because you've given it everything. And it might sound a little bit too much like amateur idealism from the Olympics in the 20s. I've always subscribed to that to that philosophy.
Yeah, and I have to agree because I mean, so my full time job, I'm a collegiate swim coach, and a lot of my messages can sometimes be misunderstood as someone who's trying to push you to win when I'm actually trying to push you to be your optimal self.
Exactly.
And a lot of
Totally.
a lot of the discussions we have on this show is about exactly that because as a like the career competitor as a title for this show when it first began over 2 years ago, it was a purposeful title because being competitive isn't about winning. Being competitive is about pushing oneself to one's greatest ability. In my personal opinion, that's what I believe to be competitive. I think our greatest competitor in life, we just have to look into a mirror, and that's if we can allow that person to be the greatest version of themselves, then we're winning. We're, we're
Yeah.
we're competing and we're winning. And
So let me tell you, you are 100% correct. So let me tell you this. So when I do these events, and I speak to a lot of people, maybe 50 to 100,000 people a year. So I mean, I've spoken to lots and lots of people over the years. So over the last sort of 6 months since COVID hit, and I moved all my keynotes and workshops virtual, I have really cool interactivity with the audience. And I used to have it when I used to do my events in big audits as well. So I would ask people, send me one line when they write the codes. Send me a line. People will send me these lines of code, and it all comes up on the screen. And it's amazing to see what everyone writes about who they want to be and where they want to go and what change they want to make. I'll be a better father, or I'll be a lifelong learner, or I'll do what I say I will do. People write amazing, amazing words, but everyone only writes 2 lines. And I've read millions of lines of code. So all the amazing stuff that I've read, I will pray, I will have faith. Um, I'll be the best version of myself. I'll be the optimal version. I mean, people write really profound stuff. People write 2 lines. So the one line they write, which ties into what you've just said about people being the optimal version of yourself, people write, I will be better. Okay. This is a fundamental life purpose. I will be better. So that's one aspect of what the meaning of life is. That's half of it. I will be better. The other half is I will help others be better. So whatever anyone writes fits into one of those 2 interconnected rivers. I call it the river of life, and the 2 tributaries are I will be better. This is the river of life called purpose. I will be better. I'll help others be better. That's who we are as people. And when people realize this, that this is our mission. This is what gives our lives meaning. We want to be better. Yeah, we want to be the best we can. We want to learn. We want to be better. We want to be a better dad. We want to be a better mom. We want to be a better coach. And then you want to help others be better too. So it's beautiful when people have this realization. How bloody interconnected are we?
Yeah, yeah,
It's
and
pretty
you
awesome.
know,
But it's how simple is that? How simple.
and isn't that funny though? You know the simplicity of all this, and yet the inability that we have to be able to implement it each and every day. And I
Yeah,
think the one thing that I'm noticing so much with everything that you're saying here, Shaun, is your level of awareness. And I think with purpose comes awareness, because the purpose, and I would love to use this as an opportunity now to transition more into what it is you spend so much time talking about now in all these speeches that you do. For me, that awareness is becomes so much more conscious. Your awareness becomes something that is such a bigger part of your conscious state when you have a very clear purpose. And I think so often when we are without purpose, we can go many, many hours during the day and really not pay attention to what it is we're doing. So suddenly we're now without awareness. And so for me, this is something that, going back to my point I made early on of the work I've been doing on myself, so much of it has started with, are you aware of what you're doing? Are you aware of how you're coming across? Are you aware of how you're being received? And for me to actually establish my purpose each and every day, I've always felt as though it's vital for me to know how aware I am of all of the many facets to my day, in my role as a father, in my role as a husband, in my role as a coach. So with that being said, I don't know whether any of that sort of connects with you in terms of the discussions that you have with regards to being purposeful, but it just seems to me as though so much of what you're telling me here from over the years, you've always had an innate ability to be very aware of your actions and your behavior. Is that accurate?
very much so. I mean, I always think that I always had a great empathy for people and a great deal of respect. And empathy and respect, I think, are very interconnected. And I think that certainly came from my mom and dad. You spoke to everyone the same, regardless of, I grew up in apartheid segregated South Africa, but with my parents, everyone was treated the same way with respect, whether they were a black, white, brown. Um, doesn't matter whether a person is a CEO or whether a person is just a young kid coming up to you after you've lost a super close heat for an autograph. You've got to. I felt it's really easy to treat people the same way. So I always had this, I think, awareness that, as an athlete and as a successful athlete, your fundamental role is to inspire. And you've got a responsibility to be respectful to people when they come to you. And it's not like they want a piece of you. They just want to, they just want to connect. And I think you have great responsibility, to be warm, to be open, to be respectful, to be well mannered. And it's the same, I think, that when I do these events and workshops, I'm not up there with my finger wagging around telling people this is the path and this is the way. Um, I don't think people like that. I would prefer to be softer, um, warmer, more empathetic, and just reveal a perspective and tell some stories about my life that I'm hoping will enlighten people to some of the decisions that I made. Um, and perhaps through my perspective, people can see their own perspective. And that's kind of what I try to do. And then I show the code and get people to write the code. So my presentations are very simply constructed. Tell four stories or five stories about purpose and passion, and I'll reveal how the code works, show the code in action, get everyone to do it. Um, and then hopefully everyone goes home just with a renewed enthusiasm, with some hope about the future. Because also what I do, and you'll find this, I think, interesting being a coach, is that when I've been starting my presentation since COVID, since March, I start up and I say, I want one word from everyone in the audience. And they text it to me, or they send it to me just via the web, and it comes up on the screen. I want one word that reflects how you're feeling right now. One word. Send me a word. So hundreds of these words will bomb in on the screen, and they'll create a word cloud. So if you've got 1,000 people, you've got 1,000 words coming in, but there'll be a word cloud created. So the most commonly uttered words, or the commonly written words, will be larger. So let me tell you what the words are. And this describes the mindset. I call it a SAD mindset, SAD mindset: stress, anxiety, despair, and depression. Stress, anxiety, despair, and depression. Those are the words. So that's about 80% of the words that bomb in at the beginning of the event. So now I ask people, give my perspective, show them how the code works. Everyone writes their code. It's 20 minutes, and then everyone writes their code. And then I go, okay, now and one line that's about you being better. And the lines come in and they fill the screen. Wow. And it's amazing. And people see and become so uplifted by everyone else's words. And then I say, okay, now send me one line in about helping others be better. I'll be a better friend. I will volunteer. And these beautiful, beautiful commitments, these promises that people may come in, it goes from 20% positive to 100% positive. So in 2 hours, that's a mindset change. Okay, how long is it going to last? We've done some academic studies. It's been positive after 3 months. It's been positive after 6 months. It's been positive after 9 months. We haven't studied it beyond that. But this little reset, I like to think that my code, it's like a little reset button. People can come and hear me, and okay, it's 2 hours. It's a bit of a time commitment, but boom, you've made a reset. You've written your code, 12 lines, every line beginning with, well, it's not my code. It's your code. All I'm giving is a structure. The surface code was given to me through surfing because it just came out of surfing. And this sort of turned into this whole wave of speaking to people now and getting them to write their own codes. And it's just sort of taken my life, in a completely different path. And then when my wife and I lost Matthew, I really, really focused on it because I came to realize, and I went back to grad school, man. I went back to university. I was like,
good for you.
they went back and did a master's at like, sure, man, I must have been, I was the oldest dude in the university. I think I was older than the oldest lecturer. But but I did a master's in leadership, master of science in leadership, and I came across amazing studies. And I read 108 books over that 18-month period. 108
Jeez.
books. I mean, it was like intense. It was amazing. But I really came to realize that the only way we can make change in our lives is through decisions. The decisions we make are what makes the change. You've got to make a decision. You've got to decide and do. And I felt that the code was a great way to help people through this process. And poor decisions, which no one knows this. I mean, some people do, very few people. But the biggest social problem, one of the biggest social problems in the world today is poor decisions. And poor decisions that ultimately result in death. So preventable death is a big issue. 1 million Americans die every year from poor decisions. Out of 2.4 million, 2.1 million deaths are preventable. So these are all deaths related to decisions. Someone's drugging, someone's drinking, someone's driving, someone's playing risky games, someone's getting involved with gang-related activity, someone's eating crap food. Uh, this is all documented. So how can you improve decision making to ultimately result in more positive decisions? And maybe my ultimate motivation behind this is, because of what happened to my beautiful son. He made a poor decision, played a dangerous game he heard about at school. We don't know whether it was peer pressure, was it uh, just something he heard about at school. We'll never really know, but it destroyed us. And these decisions like this are destroying families all over the world. And maybe this little tool that I discovered can help people. Open source code too, free. Use it, share it.
Yeah, yeah.
Surfing gave it to me. I'm giving it to everyone else.
Yeah, I love it. Honestly, I do. And again, this was, and I encourage everybody just to go to thestriveproject.com and read this article. It took me about 5 or 10 minutes over my morning coffee to read through it, and actually went back and read through it again in parts as well, because so much of it just hit me. And the premise, the catalyst, if you will, for everything you've gone on and done comes from this example of a poor decision. And again, so much of what I've always been trying to do with this little podcast of mine is empower people to make better decisions, just to prioritize themselves more often than not. And that,
awesome,
yeah, like that's a good decision. Just prioritizing yourself some days is a great decision, and then other days prioritizing other people is a great decision. And I think so much of what we're trying to do as people, like you said, if we can just kind of get out of our own way sometimes. And I say that to my athlete. I've lost count of how many times I've said that to my athletes over the years. The biggest issue that you have is that you're getting in your own way. You're getting in your own way. And so for me to hear someone like yourself who's been doing what you've been doing now so successfully, and I love that you make it, your message is an offering. You're offering a perspective. You're not delivering a perspective. It's an offering. It's there for people to take seriously or not take seriously. And I think the reasons behind it, when you go back to passion, when you go back to the finding that path, to having that power, those sort of words really just every time I read those words in this article, it was like you could have capitalized and bolded them every single time for them to make that sort of an impact on me every time I sort of went through that. And just to kind of bring this conversation to a close here, Shaun, just in whatever your words may be here, just describe how you want people to establish their purpose, let's say, on a day-to-day basis. How would you maybe impart some final words of wisdom on, hey, listen, if you're going to find purpose in what you do, here's a very clear-cut way to at least get started?
So I really encourage people to do this code process. A couple of years ago, there's a great Hawaiian athlete, young surfer. His name was Zeke Lau, and he was having a go on the pro tour, and he couldn't get out of 25th place. 25th. I sent him an email. I said, hey, Zeke, do this process. It takes you 20 minutes. Just bust out a sheet of paper, write 12 lines, every line beginning with I will. It's really simple. It's just a way to clarify your thoughts. It's a way to focus. It's a way to find your purpose, find your power, and find your path. And it's built around this super simple equation. I will equals power. I will equals power. And I get, when I do these events with schools and universities, I get young people chanting, I will equals power. They scream, they thunder, the auditorium shakes. I will equals power. I will equals power. Because like we both are aware the only way to make change in your life is through the decisions you make. This little mantra can help you make good decisions. So, for everyone out there that's listening to tie this up, write your code, 12 lines. Every line begins with I will. Now, what that is, that's your purpose, that's your path. And I wrote mine like 20 years ago, and I still carry my code, my Surface, I call it my Surface
Mm.
code card. I carry it around with me. I put it in my wallet. There it is. You can see it there
Love it.
in my wallet.
Wow. Right front and center.
And right there. And when things go sideways, like they do in life,
Mm,
I'll open mine and I'll read my own
mm,
words to myself because they're my words. They're not anyone else's words. When you write your code, it's not Shaun Tomson's code. It's your code. You can call it what you want. You can call it a swimmer's code, a musician's code. You can just call it Jack's code or whatever. But my words and my first line, I will never turn my back on the ocean. I will always paddle back out. I will take the drop with commitment. My words have incredible resonance
mm.
to me, because they're my words. 105 words that I wrote in 20 minutes, so many years ago. And I'll tell you this too. So I was sitting in the lineup at Rincon, and a guy paddled up to me. He's a headmaster at a local school. He said, "Shaun, I'd like you to come and talk at my school. It's called Anacapa School. We only have 80 students." My first book, Surface Code, had just been released. I'd lost Matthew maybe 6 months before, and I was chatting to the kids. And when I was chatting to the kids, I said, Surface Code's my code. I wrote it, 12 lines. Every line begins with I will. I wrote it in 20 minutes. Every every word has special resonance for me. And I just had an idea. And I said, what's your code? Why don't all of you write your code? 12 lines. The first time I ever did it. 12 lines, write it in 20 minutes, and send it to me. 80 kids. I got back about 1,000 lines of code. And the very first line of code I got back, very first time I did this exercise, and the very first line of code I got back from a young girl, her name was Elena Alcera. I will be myself.
Wow.
I will be myself. Like you said, you tell your athletes get out their
Yeah.
way. Those words, based on what had happened to our beautiful son, they were so inspiring to me that I wrote a second book called The Code, built around these concepts. But those words, I will be myself, were incredible. So for anyone that's listening that might have a family, I encourage you, write the code with your family. Sit down with your husband, sit down with your wife, sit down with your children, and you write your code together. It's just 20 minutes. It's so simple.
Mm.
And it's powerful. And then you all share your code, after you've written it together, or if you're in a sporting team, or if you're in a team at work, all of you just write your codes
Mm.
together, 20 minutes, and then stand up one at a time and you read your codes. You read your 12 to other people. Creates this level of commitment, creates this level of accountability, creates this amazing emotional connectivity. It unites people at sort of a deep level. And together you create this positive wave of hope,
Mm.
because that's what the world needs right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Just amazing stuff. And uh, just dissecting everything. And you just showed me what's in your wallet. I'll show you the notes that I was taking throughout our discussion. I think I probably set some sort of personal record for notes in an interview. But the one thing I love here, Shaun, is that at one point here in the interview, you explain how you were raised and you explain those sort of ideals. And here you are today now in this position, and so much of your work actually goes right back to these very same ideals that you were raised on. And for me, that's what I love about the let's use that word connectivity, as we have so much within this interview, connecting that young version of Shaun in his purest form as a child, learning these traits and ideals, and here you are today, decades on, and imparting these same ideals on so many people in this method with your code. And I'm gonna do it tomorrow. I'll make that promise to you right now. I'm gonna sit down tomorrow, and who knows, maybe I'll even pull my wife in to do it with me. I think it is a incredibly powerful exercise, and if it gives anybody some added purpose in what they do, then why the heck would you not do it? So Shaun, wow, I could probably keep talking to you for another 2 or 3 hours. Honestly, such wonderful stuff. Thank you so much for just bringing so much honesty, so much purity to this discussion. And honestly, it's all the pleasure's been mine, and just such an honor to have this opportunity to speak with you. So thanks again for joining us.
No, thanks for thinking of me, and I'm hoping everyone enjoyed it and write and share your code.
Love it. And my thanks again to Shaun for joining us on the show today. And as always, we'll finish with my career competitor keys to success, starting with my competitive call. I'm going to go with poise for this episode. I feel this is the trait that best represents what Shaun referenced when he would be in the most intense moments of competition and find a way to remain still, despite being in the midst of life-threatening positions when taking on the most challenging of skills out in the ocean. Yes, he would empty his mind in order to enter flow state, but that was following years and years of growth and building awareness to his surroundings. We probably encounter some sort of threat to our temperament on a daily basis, and from a career standpoint, it's important to seek a calmness within you in order to best assess and respond to each given situation. This ever-evolving balancing act of finding the optimal way to assess and respond will develop a great poise within us to handle any potential conflict, eventually becoming an instinct we can trust to keep us poised in any moment. Next is my teachable takeaway. What is your routine to be a professional? If we ever need an example of the power a routine can have on a person, reflect on the turmoil of 2020 and what that did to so many that had that daily routine turned upside down. Behind any successful performer is a routine of consistency, habits, if you will, that allow them to remain completely present in their process because each step of the way has been thought out and rehearsed to avoid any potential problems coming up regarding things that are actually within our control. So, take time to think about what your routine looks like prior to a performance and ask yourself if it is built to allow for optimal success. And finally, my motivational move. Always be yourself. That's right, I am stealing the first line of code Shaun ever received from the young girl that told him, "I will be myself." On every episode of this show, I am always trying to present offerings like Shaun does in his speeches, where you have the option to incorporate a trait, an idea, a philosophy into your daily life. But at no time am I ever challenging you to change who you are. If you're a college grad or were unemployed and are moving into a new field, or maybe an athlete having to demand more of yourself to achieve new heights, of course there will be sacrifices and things you must be willing to change, but a version of yourself has to remain at the core of who you are. So go and chase that sought-after promotion, that new career, or that gold medal, but find a way to do so being some version of your truest self. And that is it for my keys to success, and that is it for this episode. I'm so glad and appreciative that you decided to take the time to listen in. In the meantime, best of luck with everything that you've got going on, and I'm really excited to be bringing you yet another episode of Career Competitor very soon. Bye for now.